Here's how the Auburn Tigers can defeat the Ole Miss Rebels on Saturday.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken parm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. This episode of Locked On Auburn is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup between Auburn and Ole Miss. All you got to do is subscribe to Sling. The TV you love for the price you love. Try it today. It's a Ferg Friday. Happy Ferg Friday to all who celebrate. We are joined by Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. Auburn, more than a 2-touchdown dog going into Oxford this weekend. I get it. I think the line is actually very fair. I think the line makes a ton of sense. If Auburn is going to pull this off, it's all about the offense, right? It's all about how they use Robby Ashford, and maybe they can get Tank and Jarquez in space. Is that the answer here?
Honestly, I think the way Auburn wins is their defense plays super well and keeps it a low-scoring, kind of ugly game. It's been interesting this week in his press conferences and the SEC teleconference. Lane Kiffin talked about the fact that how his offense has not been great against Auburn the two times he's faced them at Ole Miss.
It's true.
That's something they got to really focus on. Yeah, it's like last season Auburn won that game against Ole Miss. Really, the last time Auburn looked impressive on both sides of the ball was against an Ole Miss team. Where they got turnovers on downs, they got regular turnovers, got 3 and outs. Defense played really well in that game, and held on for that win. It's gonna have to kind of be like that again, and then also knowing that you don't have the crowd behind you don't have your full complement up front. But the problem is that Ole Miss is a much better team than they were last year, and Ole Miss was a very good team that made it to the Sugar Bowl last season. This is a better team. It's a better defense, better offensive line. And I think there are offensive pieces that you've just come to know and expect from a Lane Kiffin team, even after the transfer portal, and the turnover they usually have. They're just really stinking good. But yeah, the Auburn's best bet in this game is get some turnovers, make it sloppy, make it low scoring, make it an ugly 11 o'clock game, and then just see if what you can get from your offense is enough. Because right now it's not looking great that they're going to get up very many points on quality opponents.
Yeah, right. And the whole thing is can Auburn score 20-plus points against anybody that's left on their schedule? And so far, that hasn't really happened. We'll see if they're
maybe
able to
Western Kentucky.
Sure. Yeah, maybe. It's at home. You should be able to do that. But sticking with the defense and making it sloppy and making it ugly, who are guys that have to do that? Derick Hall, Colby Wooden, you talking pretty much just the defensive front here?
Mostly. I would think also you need really good game from your linebackers because Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans are going to really test you. Ole Miss gets very creative in how they use their running backs. That's a really good 1-2 punch. Those guys can hit the second level pretty well and make you pay. But it's that defensive front because Ole Miss's offensive line's a lot better. They've only given up 2 sacks this season. They are a whole lot better at run blocking than they were a season ago. But yeah, that defensive front. Let me go back to the Georgia game last week. What kept Auburn in the game in the first half was Auburn's defensive line making an impact, getting after Stetson Bennett, not letting Georgia pop too many huge runs on them, and they were able to kind of impact the game. Now, dam broke into the second half because you're on the field a ton and also just had some poor play on top of it. But I think you're going to have to do that against a team like Ole Miss, and maybe it's a little bit more gettable because Ole Miss is not Georgia. However, I will say this. Auburn's won 6 straight against Ole Miss, and I said this on our podcast today, or on Thursday. Auburn's won 6 straight against Ole Miss. And a lot of times you can say, okay, well, they've done that because even if Auburn's not firing on all cylinders, they're more talented, and they're usually more talented at the line of scrimmage. Year 3 under Lane Kiffin, they've done a good job of building up an offensive and defensive front, I think, to say, hey, we can compete. We can, Ole Miss has legitimate, SEC West title, shot. They really
think they can win it. Yeah,
and they should. And they should because they are playing really, really well right now. Alabama looks particularly vulnerable, especially with Bryce Young, not 100% at the very least. they've just gotten better as a program, and they look more and more like a team that can truly contend at the line of scrimmage, where in years past, even if Auburn wasn't great, they've been able to beat teams like Ole Miss. Arkansas is kind of the same way, because they win on the line of scrimmage. That's not going to happen statistically or eye test speaking wise on the offensive line, but it could happen on the defensive line, because Auburn's defensive line is like a huge reason why this team is still being able to be competitive in some of these games.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 2 sacks given up by Ole Miss so far this season. To me, that's more about the Ole Miss offense than it is about the talent of the offensive line play. I mean, Lane Kiffin's offense and the way Jackson Dart's running it right now, he's getting better at it every week.
Mm-hmm.
He just gets the ball out so quick. That's what Auburn fans have been asking. Wow, getting choked up. That's what Auburn fans have been asking for with Robby or TJ, whoever's at quarterback. Yeah. Just like there are ways to get guys open early in the snap where you can not have to worry about the pass rush as much. And if I'm Ole Miss, that's what I do. If I'm Ole Miss, I come out and I run it, and then I just throw quick passes all over the place and just put so much pressure on these linebackers, which that's been amazing how like underwhelming the linebacking core has been this year. Right. If I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm attacking those guys through RPOs. I'm attacking those guys through running the ball with Zach Evans and Quinshon Judkins, and just quick passes to the flats and to your wide receivers. I mean, I think you just do that over the course of 60 minutes. And like you said, last week against Georgia, I think over the course of 60 minutes, the dam will break.
Yeah, and in the last 2 years when Auburn has been successful against Lane Kiffin's offense, they've done a great job of keeping the top on the defense and making Ole Miss kind of nickel and dime them, and that forces them into fourth down situations and forces them into tough third down spots. But yeah, that offensive line for Ole Miss is pretty tough. Last season, I got the numbers right here. Ole Miss was 97th in the country in sacks allowed. Now they're second. They have relied a lot more on that quick game, and I think also just Jackson Dart's a lot more of that quick trigger type of quarterback than maybe a guy like Matt Corral was. And Matt Corral was really good at that. But they've gotten better at the line of scrimmage. They're a better running team. Now, Kentucky's really the only team that they've played that is a really good team, that I would say. But you can only play who's on your schedule. And then at some points, they've looked really good. And the other thing about Ole Miss is that if it's sloppy early and Auburn's in the game in the second half, they're fine with that. They just did this to Vanderbilt a week ago. They played a closer than expected game with Tulsa. I think Troy hung around in the opener a lot longer than people thought they would. But they've just been able to overcome that time and time again. So they're not going to get uncomfortable if this thing's not going as people may have expected.
All right, we're going to talk Auburn basketball. They had their pro day earlier this week. Justin was there. We'll get his thoughts on that. But first things first, is Auburn going to fire Bryan Harsin this weekend? We speculate in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. I play Underdog Fantasy every single weekend. It's a blast. I played it last night watching the Thursday night game. It's an absolute blast. And I actually logged onto the app this morning. And if your fantasy season is over, if you just have a bad team, they have Best Ball Resurrection. It's something that they're doing right now where you can have a fantasy team through the end of the season and you just draft today. So I actually plan on doing that before everything gets going this week. So be sure to check out our friends at Underdog Fantasy. The app is free, and all you have to do is use the promo code LOCKEDON, one word, LOCKEDON, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 free. Get in on everything going on at Underdog Fantasy. Jay Ferg, before we speculate on if Bryan Harsin will get fired this weekend or at the end of the season, how can people check out everything going on at the Auburn Observer?
Yeah, auburnobserver.com. It's $6 a month or $60 a year. You get newsletters and podcasts. We had Friends of the Program this week, which was a lively one with Painter and the guys. We previewed Ole Miss. We talked a lot of basketball in our Thursday podcast for subscribers. This week did stories on Auburn's first down woes and the negative plays, and just those have been killers, man. I believe the stat is Auburn gets a negative play or an empty play on first down, they end up punting or kicking the ball like 74% of the time. This is in the last few games. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Mailbag out today, huge one. A lot of stuff with Auburn football and Auburn basketball. So auburnobserver.com, sign up. And everything we do gets sent straight to your email inbox, newsletter-wise and podcast-wise, so you can read and listen on your own time. $6 a month or $60 a year.
Worth every penny. And you can also go to Home Field and buy the new Auburn Observer shirt over at Home Field.
They're getting to people now. A lot of folks have gotten their hands on them here in the last week, and that's really cool to see.
That is cool.
But yeah,
cool.
And I'll say I'm biased because I love Home Field and it's got my logo on it. But number two, like, I think the navy Heather Home Field shirts are some of the most comfortable ones they make. The blend they use for that. So just throwing that out there.
Oh yeah, we've got a handful of. My wife has stolen all of them because she loves to wear them. So and I don't blame her at all. So yeah, be sure to support the Observer and Home Field with that too. Okay, so big speculation and a big debate amongst the Auburn fan base over the last few weeks. There's been talk of Bryan Harsin, you fire him after Ole Miss going into the bye week, so you get the interim an extra week to kind of get things going. I think that thought process makes a ton of sense. The other side of it is you keep them for the remainder of the season and wait till after the Iron Bowl. You save a little bit of money, but like $300,000 in the grand scheme when we're talking millions and millions. How much does that really impact things? I don't think it does. So what are your thoughts? What do you think the likelihood is that this is Bryan Harsin's last game as head coach for Auburn?
You know, I think it might be kind of one of those like 50-50 things, right? If they lose, I definitely could see Auburn playing out to the end of the season. It's different people in charge. It's a different situation. It's a different landscape, but that's also kind of been Auburn. Gus Malzahn, they played out the season there with him, Gene Chizik, Tommy Tuberville. So, I mean, it without an AD in place right now, like a permanent AD in place right now, could kind of make sense to wait. However, if you're going to make a move, this is the time to do it. Like, this is going to be this will be the time to do it for Auburn. Just because you will have a week to get your interim set, get a lot of things in place. I do wonder, though, about kind of the future. If you do move on for Bryan Harsin, a lot of these guys are his dudes, and a lot of these guys are people that, I'm not saying they would like refuse to coach or anything like that, but I do wonder how much would change or how much would be impacted if you do make a move. However, on top of that, last week in college football, every team that had an interim won. So like, yeah, there's this new kind of thing where you
different kind of schedule though, right? Like I was asked that when I was on the radio earlier this week. It's like, well, Nebraska's playing better, Georgia Tech's playing better, Arizona State's playing better. And it's like, yeah. But
Colorado won. And Colorado looked like one of the worst teams I've ever seen. So there might be a little different for sure. But I think
they're not going on the road. Go ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. You do have an off week, and then you come back and play home against Arkansas. Maybe you get a lift off of that. Maybe. Be all right. These teams aren't playing the same schedules. The Nebraska's in the Big Ten West. Georgia Tech's in the part of the ACC that's not as great. The Coastal, I believe, that division's not great. And the Pac-12 is the Pac-12. So, yeah, no. I mean, you do have a point there for sure. But it was kind of funny because usually it's like when you may have an interim, it's like, well, we just need to play out the rest of the season. And then when everybody goes out and wins, you're like, interesting. Like it's definitely one of those things where you're like, that's not what I expected. The other thing is just like, I do wonder, a lot of this stuff happens behind closed doors and behind the scenes and with people you don't really, it doesn't play out publicly very often. But like, how much of an advantage does Auburn have if they are going to hire a new head coach at the end of the year of being, in the mix right now, right? You're not going to be able to hire anybody, you would think, until December. But how much of it is an advantage to get out and do it because, there's already so many in the mix right now.
But can't you already do that now?
Wisconsin as well.
If Auburn wants to go hire, the two names I'm hearing the most of are Jeff Grimes and Hugh Freeze. They can already talk to those guys, maybe through back channels or whatever. But if all those rumors are true, and those are the guys on the short list and the top of the list to be Auburn's next head coach, like, you got to think contact's already been made.
It's funny though, because it's like there's a short list, quote unquote. It's like there's not even an AD in place, right? There's a lot of there's like, oh, this is probably what would happen if there was like, so yeah, I mean, you got to take a lot of it with a grain of salt as well, but it'll be interesting. And then I also think just the timing of this game is fun because Auburn fans, there's going to be a good chunk of Auburn fans who would love to see Lane Kiffin be your next head coach. That's just, and it makes a lot of sense. So that's what makes this whole weekend so interesting. And then coming back into it with the game itself, it's like, I asked Bryan Harsin earlier this week, how much has his identity on offense changed? And he really said it hadn't.
What's the identity on offense?
Well, they want to be balanced. They want to do all, kind of it's the same stuff they've been talking about all year. Just hadn't worked, as he said. How much changes in a game like this, right? It's like this could be the last stand, right, for this coaching staff. So, like, do they change that much? Do they just keep it rolling? I think the answer and the result's going to be very telling. So that's what makes this game even more interesting for a game that I think is, 2-touchdown dog for a reason. Ole Miss is very good.
Ole Miss is good. And, I think there's definitely some arguments against, like, are they as good as they actually are with the, Kentucky probably should have beaten them, 2 turnovers in the red zone type thing. But as a whole, I mean, Ole Miss is definitely the better team. I don't think there's any question about it. So we'll see. We'll see. But so are you leaning more one way or the other versus after this weekend, assuming Auburn loses, or waiting till the end of the season to get rid of Bryan Harsin?
I'm not. I wouldn't lean too much just because I see the pros and cons of both sides, and I could see Auburn doing either side. So, I don't like doing predictions because I'm very bad at them. But on top of that, it's like it is Auburn, and I just like my job is to call it like it happens. And so, I wouldn't make a prediction either way. I think there are pros and cons for doing either method if you are getting rid of them.
Yeah, and I think you also can make the argument that what appears to be more likely, I mean, there's been several folks on the beat that have reported that he will be here for the entire season. We'll see. I mean, that can change in one meeting, though, right? Sure. If they get enough money or whatever, that can change in one meeting. But
could change after a really bad game.
100%. Yeah, if you get boat race 50-0, I think that changes things too. But I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. But if it does, yeah, absolutely. But I think what's most likely right now, and what's most likely in my brain, and I could be wrong, is that he stays for the entire season. But that may not be what's best. I think both of those things could be true at the same time.
Yeah, it's. I don't know how much changes for Auburn if they do make an in-season move, and I also don't know kind of what the what happens. Let's say Auburn loses Ole Miss this weekend. What happens to this final 5 games of the year, especially when you've got 3 more home games? What does that do with attendance? What does that do with fan excitement? Like, how much is that impacted? If you're looking at a 3-4 Auburn team heading into Arkansas in a couple weeks,
does fan attendance change if Zach Etheridge is the interim head coach? I'm seeing a lot of people say like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to go to a game this year, but if they make a change, I'll go." I'm seeing a lot of that.
I could see if Auburn had an interim, I could see there being a little bit more juice and just being like, "Hey, let's finish it out. Let's support these guys that are, I think there might be a little bit more juice behind it, but I'm not thinking it's going to be a massive difference."
Yeah, I'm there with you. All right, Jay Ferg, let's talk a little basketball in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Frisky Whiskey. And boy, you may need it this weekend if things go as the experts are predicting it. If you're in Auburn, Opelika, or Lee County, if you're in that area, just hop on I-85 towards Atlanta. And as soon as you get close to that Georgia state line, you'll see billboards all over the place. And once you get into Frisky Whiskey, you will see a ton of selection, a ton of value. It's the place to be. If you're buying beer or alcohol of any kind, wine, whiskey, vodka, tequila, any of the mixers you may need as well, they've got you covered, and you'll be blown away by all the prices and the selection. Shout out to our friends at Frisky Whiskey. Justin Ferguson, Auburn Observer, you went to Auburn's Pro Day earlier this week, and you've been watching this team a ton throughout the offseason, but you're allowed to actually talk about this one, which is cool because it was open.
Yep.
What stood out to you when you watched these guys work out?
Yohan Traore is really stinking good. And I think people saw that in the Israel tour. But every time I watch him in sort of a competitive, like scrimmage environment, he stands out, man. He's really good. He moves super well for 6'10". They gave us this packet. The Auburn basketball gave us this packet that had a lot of info and a lot of testing results of like, hey, for scouts, like this is kind of what these guys measure at, some stuff you would normally see on a pro day. And number one, Allen Flanagan's numbers were crazy good. He's probably the best, I think, of every scholarship player in those numbers. And number two, Yohan Traore runs and like leaps and agility drills and all that and shuttles like a guard at 6'10". Yeah, wow. Like when you watched him play on Wednesday, they were posting him up a lot. He was finishing tough around the rim. He was getting some matchups that he liked and finishing. He's got a nice mid-range game. I think there's a lot of it where it's like him and Janai Broome still learning the offense, still kind of getting into the flow of the defensive systems and all that. So it's not perfect all the time, obviously, for these newcomers. Sure. But what they bring to the table is really, really impressive, especially with Janai Broome. The other big thing to stand out is that Bruce Pearl talks about, hey, I've got two guys that I think I know are starting. Then
I was about to ask you about that.
3 position battles. All right, well, we'll put a pin on the battles, but I'll say this: KD Johnson looked really good in the, and I thought Wendell looked good as well. He didn't shoot well, but I think all of his shots were good quality looks. Took care of the ball, he assisted, he rebounded, played good defense. He looks like a leader out there. KD Johnson had an efficient scoring game, hit several threes, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. His explosiveness, it just looks different. He is lighter on his feet, and he is attacking the rim harder. He is being more disruptive on defense because he's just moving better. I think he's moving better, and I think he feels more comfortable, where his body's at right now, and that's going to be pretty fun to see because last season, even when he wasn't at his playing weight, at his best, man, he was so impactful for Auburn.
Yeah. All right, so you mentioned the quote from Bruce. Sounds like 2 starters he's already feels pretty good about. Who do you think they are? Is Traore one of them?
No, I think right now it's Wendell Green Jr. and KD Johnson. He talked about that Yohan Traore and Jalen Williams are still head-to-head, neck and neck in the power forward spot. He said the same thing about Janai Broome and Dylan Cardwell with Stretch Akimbola still in the mix there at center. He also said small forward's a tough spot right now because Allen Flanagan just got back to practice. He missed a couple of weeks for personal reasons. Great news there for Auburn. It's plenty of time for him to knock the rust off and get back going in time for the start of the season. That's great news for them. Chance Westry is going to be out for the next couple, 2 to 3 weeks. So that puts a little bit of a spin on it. Chris Moore's getting more reps, and I think he's benefiting from that. You're getting some Leor Berman reps as well at small forward. So those are the 3 battles that are still, by Bruce's own admission, still kind of going on. Backcourt seems pretty locked in with Wendell, and I would say KD. Zep Jasper didn't participate in pro day; he had a stomach bug. I think you're seeing a little bit more KD, hearing a little bit more about KD. Both those guys are going to be the reps for media days next week in Birmingham for Auburn. So that seems to be kind of where it's leaning. And I think the front court, you can probably have your favorites and have this is probably how it's going to end up. But for right now, you're still having to earn it because there are some new faces and some injuries that just kind of, make it less clear right now.
Yeah. So how do you think the backcourt rotation is going to look? Do you think Zep can play both as a backup role? Do you think they're all going to kind of move around, or do you think Trey Donaldson's going to be a true backup at some point this year?
I think Trey Donaldson could develop into a guy that plays some decent minutes. I think, you also have to think with your 1 and your 2, you have 80 minutes to fill, and so right now it's like, can you split those 80 minutes between 3 guys, or can you split most of them between 3 guys and then get a little bit from a Trey Donaldson, maybe some Chance Westry playing back there when he's back to 100%. Maybe you get a little bit of that. That's probably the more likely scenario. It's interesting. I see the value if they wanted to make KD a 6-man where he just comes up in the second unit and just tears people up on offense and defense. I could see that. And then start with Zep Jasper, start with that defense and ball security. But I think whoever doesn't start between KD and Zep, that guy's going to get starter quality minutes. It's going to be kind of like Wendell last season. Wendell didn't start, but Wendell was still one of the best point guards in the SEC in major college basketball by the end of the year because he was getting starter quality minutes. So I think that's kind of how your rotation. And I'll be interested to see how much Donaldson fits in. Donaldson looked like he shot the ball well in the pro day scrimmage. And I think he's still learning and kind of picking up some things on offense and defense with the systems. And then Chance Westry can play the two. Chance Westry can fill in the one in some spots. But it's going to be a little different for him because he's going to miss this time with that knee scope.
All right, let's last thing on pro day. Let's zoom out a little bit more. I know this has been a thing for a few years now, but at any point when you're at Auburn's pro day and there's NBA scouts there, do you stop and think about what is actually happening? Because it's still crazy to me.
It's crazy. Bruce was talking about how crazy it was when we talked to him on Wednesday afternoon. Honestly, to be completely honest with y'all, like it's so normal to me at this point because you just saw what Jabari Smith did and Walker Kessler did and JT Thor's in the league and Sharif Cooper's trying to stay in the league. And you've got, guys are like, you go to an Auburn basketball game, they could be playing Central Connecticut State and like, there are going to be NBA scouts there, right? It's just like becomes so normal. The pro day, maybe that's the thing that I think is like the most exciting or maybe the most telling part for Auburn basketball from this pro day is that this team, like, Yohan Traore could be a one and done guy. It could be a one and done. He's got that 5-star pedigree to him. You don't have any guys like last year was Jabari. It was like everybody knew Jabari was going to be a dude and a lottery pick. This year, you don't really have this kind of like, whoa, this guy's definitely first rounder this year. Boom, go out here and make sure you're there. But Auburn has built that reputation up that on a team that's got some dudes that may need a little more time, or there are a lot of veterans, that usually NBA scouts don't drool all over. 28 of the 30 teams are there, and pro days are happening everywhere right now. Yeah. Like any big name basketball team, this has kind of been around the week that they really do it. And at Auburn, there were a ton of teams there for Auburn. Only 2 teams weren't there, the Raptors and the Suns. And I don't know why the Suns, Auburn gave them Charles Barkley. I don't know what the deal is there. Raptors, different country. But 28 out of 30, that's a really, really good time for a team that does not have this like immediate can't miss, this is a lottery pick guy this year. In the last few years, they've kind of had those guys. And maybe Traore does that. Maybe Chance Westry, if he gets back from this injury, maybe Chance Westry is one of those like Isaac Okoro one and dones. But man, this is what
really about a Janai Broom taking a Walker Kessler type step?
Yeah,
I know he's older, but is there a chance there? Maybe late first or a second round guy?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. He could definitely do that. And I wouldn't rule out. Like those seniors, like if Alan Flanagan gets back to full scale, Alan Flanagan, that's a draftable dude in the NBA. His testing numbers are really impressive. He's just got to get that shot back and that offensive confidence back, and put it out there on the floor. And it's like Wendell Green Jr. and KD Johnson are going to be guys like I think like Jared and Bryce, where they projected for them, but they're going to get their shots. They're going to get their shots in the league for sure. And so you want to keep an eye on guys like that.
Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer. One more time, tell people how they can check out everything you've got going on, man.
Yeah, AuburnObserver.com, $6 a month or $60 a year. You can, get access to everything we've got going on. We email everything to you. It's the easiest way to keep up with what all we put out. And there's something pretty much every day, sometimes multiple things a day, like Thursday. So check it out, AuburnObserver.com.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you so much for your time. As always, maybe this was the last show of the Bryan Harsin era. We'll see. We'll be back on Sunday morning to talk about everything that happened with Auburn versus Ole Miss. All right here on Locked On Auburn.